In this module, we will be covering strategies for improving nutritional habits for health. Ultimately, every individual is responsible for their own food choices. Every single day, nutrition can have an impact on health. Thus, it is well worth the effort to learn to eat in a manner to best support overall health throughout a lifetime. As we discuss some nutrition recommendations, reflect and apply what you have learned in the other nutrition modules in order to best understand where these recommendations come from. There are 10 leading causes of death in the U.S. Chronic diseases arise from a combination of factors including genetic inheritance, prior or current diseases, such as obesity or hypertension, and lifestyle choices. Out of these causes, the only one that is completely controllable is daily lifestyle choices, which can prevent, delay, or treat chronic disease. As our bodies age, they accumulate the effects of a lifetime of choices, and in later years, these impacts can make the difference between health or chronic disease. Diet and nutrition are directly related to the risk of chronic disease as we age. The chart lists causes of death related to nutrition with the red bars. The causes of death with the green bar are alcohol-related. Notice that the leading causes of death in the U.S. are heart or cardiovascular disease and cancers, both of which have a nutrition-related component. Worldwide, the leading cause of death is heart disease. We will briefly review heart disease and cancers and dietary recommendations for prevention of these diseases since they impact so many individuals around the globe. Chronic diseases often have suspected underlying causes rather than one distinct cause. Risk factors are often linked to a disease but cannot be definitely named. In addition to nutritional risk factors for disease, there are genetic, environmental, behavioral, and social risk factors associated with chronic diseases. This table lists diet-related as well as other risk factors linked with chronic diseases. Certain dietary behaviors often can be significant risks for chronic diseases, especially when practiced over a lifetime. In addition to dietary risk factors for chronic disease, various chronic diseases are risk factors for other chronic diseases as shown in this diagram. Often one chronic disease, such as obesity, contributes to the development of another chronic disease, such as type 2 diabetes. Therefore, it can be difficult to figure out the exact contribution each disease is then having on overall health. There are millions of people around the world who suffer from some form of cardiovascular disease. One reason this disease is so deadly is that the heart does not easily regenerate after damage has been done. This disease impacts both men and women. The root cause of most forms of heart disease is atherosclerosis, or the hardening of arteries. Plaques form along the inner walls of the artery. The body then has a complex response to the tissue damage and inflammation, which eventually results in mineralization. This further increases the hardening of the plaques. This process may be repeated until the artery wall diameter is lessened, thereby reducing blood flow, playing a central role in heart disease. Some experts agree that diet accounts for approximately a third of all cases of coronary artery disease. A diet that is high in saturated fat is a major contributor for the formation of plaques and disease progression. Other major contributors to damage to the artery wall are elevated LDL cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. Due to the link with unhealthy levels of blood lipids, body mass index, and blood pressure with heart disease, a table with the unhealthy and healthy values of these variables is presented here. It is important to know what levels of these factors are associated with an increased risk of heart disease. If values fall into the borderline category, individuals should take this opportunity to make changes and potentially prevent disease development. This table lists several dietary strategies to reduce the risk of heart disease. Additionally, notice that physical activity is recommended as another contributor to risk reduction of heart disease. Please read through and familiarize yourself with these recommendations. This table lists some of the percent reductions in LDL cholesterol that may be possible with dietary changes. Most notable is an 8 to 10% reduction in LDL levels with an intake of less than 7% of total calories consumed from saturated fat. However, a combination of all these diet-related strategies would have the greatest impact on reduction of LDL levels. The second leading cause of death in the U.S. is cancers, but this disease is also prevalent worldwide. Cancer arises in the genes. It often begins when a cell's genetic material, or DNA, sustains damage from a carcinogen, such as a free radical compound, radiation, or other factors. Such damage occurs every day, but most is quickly repaired. If the damage can't be repaired, the cell self-destructs to prevent the proliferation of damaged cells. Occasionally, a damaged cell loses its ability to self-destruct and stop reproducing. The cell then replicates uncontrollably, and the result is a mass of abnormal tissue or a tumor. Once a tumor is formed, the cancer can metastasize or spread via blood or lymph. For example, a cancer that starts in the lungs and spreads to the brain is called metastatic lung cancer, not brain cancer. Let's break the process down by steps. First, an individual is exposed to a carcinogen, and there is entry of the carcinogen into the cell. Initiation of cancer begins as the carcinogen damages or changes the cell's genetic material. Acceleration of the cancer starts by other carcinogens or promoters. The cell begins to multiply out of control, and there is tumor formation. The cancer can then be spread via blood and lymph, and disruption of normal body functions may begin. It is in the first 4 steps, culminating with tumor formation, that researchers think are the key to cancer prevention. Life-threatening cancer occurs if the tumor tissue, which cannot perform its normal functions, overtakes the healthy organ in which it developed or disseminates its cells throughout the bloodstream to other parts of the body. For most cancers, lifestyle factors and environmental exposures are the major risk factors. Almost certainly, dietary factors substantially influence cancer development. The degree of cancer risk imposed by the food depends partly on the eater's genetic inheritance, but the exact nature of this relationship is not yet known. When it comes to risk factors, our individual risk of developing cancer is a complicated combination of the lifestyle choices we make, such as tobacco use, nutrition, physical activity, and stress management, heredity, and environment. Amazingly, up to approximately 2/3 of cancers could be avoided altogether by the application of existing knowledge of prevention and detection. Dietary-related behaviors can have a substantial influence on the development of cancer, as shown in this table here. This table lists some additional recommendations for reducing cancer risk. You can see that in addition to many dietary recommendations, regular physical activity is linked to risk reduction for some types of cancer. Overall, it is the whole foods and the chronic diets consumed, not single nutrients, that may be most influential in cancer prevention. However, there are phytochemicals and nutrients found in fruits and vegetables that may prevent or reduce the development of some types of cancer. For example, the cruciferous vegetables shown here is associated with lower rates of esophageal and endometrial cancer. In addition, fruits and vegetables have fiber. So one dietary change individuals can make that has a large impact on their health is the consumption of the recommended servings of fruits and vegetables daily. Many phytochemicals are antioxidants, and some confer anti-inflammatory effects. Often phytochemicals are destroyed or removed by modern food processing techniques. Interestingly, though, lycopene, which is a phytonutrient that can be found in tomatoes, is concentrated in processed foods such as spaghetti sauce and ketchup, making those foods much better sources of that compound than the tomatoes themselves. Phytochemicals impart bright colors to fruits and vegetables, such as lutein makes corn yellow, lycopene makes tomatoes red, and carotene makes carrots orange. The bottom dietary line here is to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. This slide lists some tips and ideas for increasing fruit and vegetable intake in order to help individuals eat the recommended amount per day. It can be quite a challenge to consume a healthy diet on a regular basis. Hopefully, much of what you have learned in this lecture and others has convinced you to do so in order to prevent the development of chronic disease and to support a healthy, physically active lifestyle. This slide lists the 5 general characteristics of a healthy eating pattern. The first being variety, or consuming a wide selection of foods. Moderation is making sure that foods are consumed within the recommended ranges and not to excess. Calorie control is consuming the recommended energy level to support a healthy body weight. Balance is eating foods in the right number and proportion so that foods rich in some nutrients do not crowd out foods rich in other nutrients. Finally, adequacy is eating to consume all of the essential nutrients, fiber, and energy in proper amounts to maintain health and body weight. A well-planned diet is one way to include each of these components into an individual's eating pattern. The USDA food patterns can serve as a guide for individuals of all ages to identify the specific amounts of food needed from each group to consume a healthful diet for a specified calorie level. This table presents examples for sedentary and active men and women of different ages. Other examples can be found on the ChooseMyPlate.gov website. Within these food patterns are recommendations for subgroups of foods in certain groups such as the vegetable and protein group to allow for a healthful variety of foods to be consumed on a daily basis. There are hundreds of choices to make when planning meals. This slide presents simply one example of how to distribute the recommended amounts of food throughout the day for a 2,000-calorie meal plan. This slide then translates how the recommendations on the previous two slides can be achieved with an intake of specific foods. Resources such as this can give individuals a sense of what a healthy, well-balanced, nutrient-dense intake looks like, which can then be used to model intake on other days. We know that cultural traditions and social values often dictate what individuals eat. Although the food patterns on the previous slides may appear to be somewhat rigid, there is actually a lot of flexibility within these patterns. This slide depicts how the food patterns can be modified to accommodate an ethnically diverse dietary intake. Individuals can have all the nutrition knowledge in the world, but this is of little value if they do not put this knowledge to practice. In order to act on this knowledge, people need to change their behaviors and make different dietary choices. Being aware of where one stands in relation to making these changes can be helpful in allowing one to progress towards specific dietary goals. Often we use the 6 stages listed in this table to categorize individuals with where they are at in making a change. Based on where an individual is categorized, this would then drive what actions they should take to move toward healthier changes. For example, if individuals are in the contemplation stage and just beginning to think about whether or not they want to change their dietary intake, it would not be helpful to tell them that they need to follow a specific meal plan. Rather, they first need to decide if a change might be advantageous to them and commit to making a change before they can go about it. In order to make a plan or a dietary change, people must first be aware of what they are eating. The best way to do this is to self-monitor or track food intake for several days or even daily for a period of time. There are many tools out there in order to help individuals do this. This course has exposed everyone to the Super Tracker, which is just one of the many tools to help track food intake. Tracking food intake allows individuals to identify any areas of food intake that may need to be improved upon. Once an area to change has been identified, a goal should be set to improve this area. Setting small, achievable goals will help individuals move along the spectrum to better health. Once the goal has been achieved, it is important to reassess and see what other changes an individual can make to improve overall health and whether or not this change can be maintained. Nutrition is a key component in overall health. Food should be something that is enjoyed, but that also supports overall health and well-being.